Hello, welcome back. I am Charles Musgrove, your host of Answers That Count. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to this recording that we do at least once a week. And heck, if you notice something different, we're in a different studio today. We are in, make sure I get this right, we're at 30A TV Studio, and we're in Studio A. I'm going to call it Studio A for Answers That Count. So we're out there we're out here at the 98 Distillery. So we're in the 30A territory in near Destin, Florida. So we are over where the beaches are beautiful, the sun is great, and it's great to be over here. So anyway, this is Answers That Count, and we are over at Studio A for Answers That Count with 38 TV. And you know where to find us. We've got, if you notice on our video now, we have in addition to that, at the bottom of our screen, we have the other places that we're at. We're on Amazon Fire TV. We're at Roku TV. And we're on YouTube. So if you're watching us on YouTube now, leave us some comments, leave us some notes, questions, or just some comments down in the box below. So we'll respond to that, and we appreciate you watching us. And you know where you can always find us on all the podcast channels that you're used to: Apple Podcast, iHeart Radio. We're on all those, Spotify. So just whatever your favorite channel is, your platform, we're going to be there. Look for Answers That Count. And we try, you know what we try to do. We try to bring those nuggets of knowledge every week to the viewing audience and the listening audience. So, again, we have another great show lined up today. We have our welcoming back guest, Professor Joe Calhoun from FSU. Professor Joe, thank you for joining us again.
Well, thanks. Always great to be with you. Go Noles. We got a big football game this weekend, so hoping for a win on the gridiron.
Absolutely. We had a rough start, and we're recording this on Friday, September 24th, or actually September 25th. So this is the day before Florida State plays a rival game down at the University of Miami, and we are the away team this year. And by the time you're watching this, the outcome will be known. So we're enthusiastic about the outcome right now. So if it turns out the other way, we did all we could to cheer them on. And I think we're going to have a coach in the box. So I understand that our head coach, is he was diagnosed with the COVID-19, and I think he was asymptomatic, but he did test positive. So they've got him in the box. I guess he'll be coaching from Zoom. This may be the first time we see a national college team being coached from a Zoom channel. So we'll check out and see how that works out.
Yep, interesting times that we're living in.
Interesting times. It's 2020. This is the longest decade that we've experienced this year so far. So we're getting near the end, and I think we're going to turn our clocks back very soon. So is that this weekend or the next weekend?
You know, I don't remember. I don't think it's this weekend.
I think it's next weekend. So we're going to add one more hour to this year. So everybody needs to be prepared for that. So buckle up when you add that hour. So anyway, we're going to talk economics, but before we jump into that, let's take a peruse through some of the articles of this week. And some of these articles really have an impact to some of our recent podcasts that we've done. This is one that I believe it was last week's podcast where we talked about the cash for clunkers that was done about 10 years. When was that done? Back in 2008 time period?
That was the result of the Great Recession. So that would have been 2009, 2010, in that era.
Right. So if you recall, the government did the cash for clunkers where they were trying to stimulate new car purchases. So that had the unintended consequences of really debilitating the used car market, because it was, in order to qualify for that, you had to destroy and render useless the used car. So it was really had a premium on the used car market, and what the effect of that was, it probably damaged the people that could least afford a new car, and it made the used cars more expensive because the people that are more wealthy and able to buy cars anyway, they probably hurried up their purchase and made a purchase of a new car.
Yeah, so it did two things. One, it just moved future consumption up a couple of years. Now, that's arguably a good thing, but in the grand scheme of things, over a longer period of time, it didn't add to sales. It just moved them from one time period to another. The more negative consequence was, as you said, the used car market had fewer used cars available, And when you have a market with less available, the price is going to get pushed up. And who typically buys used cars? People at the lower end of the economic ladder. And they were harmed by that policy. And people at the upper end of the economic ladder really weren't impacted and maybe even were benefited from that.
Yeah, interesting. So this is a headline I think from yesterday's paper. This is from the great state of California, or the Republic of California, where it says Newsom orders 2035 phase out of gas powered vehicles, calls for fracking ban. Man, Joe, this seems like just a repeat where government has tried to intervene in normal commerce, and you can only imagine what the unintended consequences are going to be.
Yeah, so in a typical market setting, producers only make what consumers want to buy. And then they reach an equilibrium price and quantity such that the market clears or everything settles, or what we also call equilibrium. And here, what you have is the very heavy hand of government saying, consumers, I don't care what you like or what you don't like. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to allow. And I'm only going to allow electric vehicles or non gas, but we all know that means electric vehicles to be sold. So even if you want a gas powered, the government, and telling you you can't have that. Now, today we've got about 4% of automobile manufacturing is for electric cars. So that means 96% is gas powered. And the only reason that the car manufacturers are doing that is because 96% of the people want a gas powered car. Well, now California says, well, that doesn't matter. I'm telling you what you can and can't do. So I can think of immediate consequences that are going to happen. Number one, if I'm a car dealership, I'm going to line up just outside the California border, and I'm going to sell cars to people in California who still want to buy and own a gas powered car. They can't buy it in California. So I'm going to set up my shop just 1 mile on the other side of the border. Come on over. I'll sell you a car, and then you drive it back home. Because the law doesn't prevent you from driving a car, it just prevents me, the manufacturer, from selling a car in California.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that's going to happen. You're just going to move production geographically. Instead of
Right.
having the cars sold in California, they're going to be sold in Arizona and maybe even farther places away. If I want a gas powered car bad enough, I mean, I'll drive to Colorado. I'll drive anywhere to get the car that I want, and then just take it back home. And then we're also going to see a negative consequence in the used car market as well, because those prices are going to go up because we've distorted the price in the new car.
Right.
So you're going to have a bunch of cascading effects here. So while it might be good intentioned, I mean, I certainly want less of a carbon footprint in my state and in my country and the world. But we need to be very careful about weighing the costs and benefits. And it's not just the immediate costs and benefits, it's the long-term and it's the unintended costs and benefits that we need to factor in.
Yeah, I think studies have shown that people love their cars. They love their gas-powered cars, and they love their big cars. So this is another example where, unfortunately, it looks like there's a lot of the states they're increasing taxes, or they're making it more uncomfortable for the citizens to live. So what you're doing is you're having an exodus from those type of states. You saw where Joe Rogan he left the state and went to Texas, which is there's no state income tax there. And in Texas, you saw where you've seen where other people are leaving states that are very well known, that they're going from high tax states to low or no tax states. So people
are literally going to vote with their feet.
They are
vote with their feet by picking up, and they move across the border. Whether that's county, I mean, we do that within our states as well, right? I mean, we're not happy with our city or our county, but we like our state, so we just move to the next city. But in America, since we're all free to do this because we can cross state lines and still keep our American citizenship, that I can move from Florida to Texas, or I can move from California. I can move wherever I want. And where I choose to go is going to be more aligned with the policies that I want to live under.
Right. And I think that's when the government officials, that's when they take notice, is when their taxing base has changed, or when they run into further economic distress caused by the exodus of their citizens and their tax base.
Sure,
So
sure.
we'll see
Yeah,
what.
they'll respond to people. I mean, if enough people leave, or maybe the opposite happens. Maybe this is such an appealing law that people actually move to California because they think it's so desirable. So we can't discount that as well. You might
Exactly.
have people leave and people come in, but that's the beauty of our republic. That's the beauty of having different laws in different states, that Americans can choose where they want to live and what kinds of rules that they want to live under.
Right. And that's why the way our government is set up is it pushes a lot of authority down to the state level. So you really have many incubators across the state so that you can see the effect of that. So you don't put in place a law that affects the whole federal, all the states. You can almost like you can test that in different states as they try different laws.
Yes, yes, and that's one of the strongest aspects of our republic and the way we've governed ourselves is we do have 50 states that can move somewhat independently of the federal government, and we can try new things and we can figure out what works and what doesn't work, and then we can learn from each other.
Absolutely. There was another article that I saw this week, and this also was in the this is in the Wall Street Journal. The other was in the L.A. Times, I believe, is where John pulled that up. But this talks about the this goes back to a show that we had previously where we were discussing the effect of COVID and the limited on-campus students at Florida State University in Tallahassee and the effect that we thought we would see to the economy here. Then I read this article. This is actually talking about Virginia Tech, but you're going to see this in all the college towns where people are now recognizing and they're feeling the economic effect of the limited students on campus.
Yeah, absolutely. And no surprise that what Tallahassee is going through, even though Tallahassee isn't quite the typical college town because we have state government here and we're the capital of Florida, but for a lot of reasons, we are a college town. And we're seeing this happen across the United States, especially in those cities like Columbus, Ohio, and Champaign, Urbana, Illinois, Big Ten universities that just recently said, "Well, we changed our mind." That they were going to cancel their football season, but now they're going to put it back in. So I'm sure those towns are breathing a sigh of relief because even though it won't be normal, it'll be better than zero. Uh,
Absolutely, yeah.
we're seeing this. This is just a great example of what we talked about last week. Something in the ACC, of course, with our brothers up in Virginia Tech going through something very similar to what we're going through here. So it's a very familiar story.
It is. There's a couple of other. This is more on a federal basis, but the jobless claims that we're seeing those are kind of holding steady. There's not a lot of improvement or worsening of that, and I'm wondering if that's because of we still have some of the larger states like New York that's still in they're pretty heavily locked down. I think California still has a lot of they're pretty heavily into the lockdown mode out there as well. So I think
Yeah,
until
yeah. There's a lot of factors in play here. If you look back historically, a couple of months before every major election, there's this increase in uncertainty. So every decision maker, whether you're a business decision maker or a consumer, that air of uncertainty is going to cause you to slow down a little bit. So this is a typical pattern under normal conditions. And of course, we're anything but normal. But I just want to remind people that, a major election causes people to pause and not make too many plans for the future because they want to see what the result of the election is to see if there's going to be any major policy changes. So you do have a little bit of that going on, but clearly the biggest issue is recovering from the pandemic and how fast are these businesses opening up. And even if the business opens their door, that doesn't necessarily mean all their customers are going to come flooding back. So it's one thing for me to open my door and say, "Hey, I'm over here, come on back." But then you can't make consumers come back. You just have to hope and pray that they do. And again, there's a lot of uncertainty there. So even in Florida, as we're kind of rolling out some different procedures for how we can open up, going into phase two and allowing bars and lounges to open up, we're not sure what the effect is.
right,
So the business owner, I've got this wait and see approach before I hire somebody because I don't want to hire somebody and then 3 weeks later lay them off. That'd be painful for everybody.
right, yeah. There's a lot of variables in play this time of year, and this year being the election year. I mean, this is an election year like no other that I can remember. So there's just a lot of uncertainty going on, and you're going to see that in the stock market too, where there's a lot of up and down. So the last article that we'll touch on is the new aid package. So we're seeing the gap is kind of closing on that. So I see a lot of buzz out there that people are talking about getting this final aid package or this additional aid package. The Democrats they've come down to 2.4 trillion. I think the Republicans are there. Whatever that skinny bill was, they proposed 1.5 trillion. So the gap is closing. And I think the president has stated that he wanted to see it a little bit richer than the 1.5 trillion. So they're getting close. I would expect to see something pass before November 3rd. So I think next week is kind of a big week. I believe they're scheduled to go on their fall break the end of next week, but who knows what's going to happen with the Supreme Court filling of that vacancy as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of distractions right now. Obviously, the Supreme Court nominating process is going to be a major distraction, and maybe that's too big of a distraction to overcome any kind of aid package getting through. It's going to be really fascinating to see that come out. My only concern there is, we talk about a skinny bill. We talk about a low number of 1.5 trillion. That is still an insanely large amount of
Exactly.
money. So,
yeah.
My concern is we've become calloused to these truly immense numbers. I mean, we throw $1 trillion around like it's $100 bill, and it's not. It's a monumental stack of $100 bills. And I think we need to kind of resensitize ourselves to exactly what is $1 trillion. It's a big pile of money that has to be paid back. I mean, you're just not going to create it out of thin air. We're going to have to pay more taxes in the future. We're going to have to service debt for a longer period of time and at a higher level. I mean, this is real money that we're talking about. And I hope everybody appreciates that part of it, instead of just throwing around $1 trillion and saying, well, that's too little and 3 trillion is too big, so let's just cut it in half. Okay, well, 2 trillion, that's really big. Our entire economy on an annualized basis is 21 trillion.
Right.
So you're talking about a significant share of our economy here. This is not just some small package.
Yeah, it's really scary. I mean, all the stuff that we've gone through in COVID this year in 2020, and I think the desensitization of $1 trillion. I mean, that's just one part of that's the result of this shutdown. I mean, we've been so hypersensitive to the disease and the effects of the disease and the death that we've done so many things that we normally would not do, and the spending is one of those consequences that we hope we never have to relive. But man, we're going to be paying for this a long time.
Yeah, we really are.
All right, man, I appreciate the update with what's in the news and how it relates to some of our previous podcasts. That's always interesting to me when we see the topics that we've discussed and how it plays out in everyday the news that we see and just how we live our life on a daily basis.
I mean, economics is not just a bunch of theories that are stuck in a textbook and we play in the classroom. I mean, this has relevance to our daily lives. So I'm glad we can make that connection.
Good deal. We're going to jump into economic theory number 10. I want to get a time check from John. John, are we getting close to the cutoff for the radio show?
You're at 18 and a half minutes.
All right, so we're good. Here's what we're going to do, Joe. We're going to tee this up, and we're going to take a pause. Everybody watching this or listening on the podcast, hang tight as we take a little stoppage at about the 27-minute break, and then we'll continue this into the post-show. So today's economic theory, I'm going to read the name of this and then let Joe do some explaining. But this will make sense. Economic progress comes primarily through trade, investment, better ways of doing things, and sound economic institutions. So that sounds like a lot, but it's real simple.
Yeah, well, the first thing I want people to recognize is progress doesn't automatically happen. It's not like the economy is on autopilot and we are guaranteed or we are destined to have progress. If you look back at most of human history, progress was not normal at all. For generations, people did the same thing in the same way and living standards really didn't change for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years. And it's really only in the last few hundred years that we've seen this tremendous growth. Now, thankfully, we live in an age where growth does happen, progress does happen on a regular basis, but the downside there is we've now taken it for granted because it happens so much. And I just need everybody to pause and just recognize it's not guaranteed. We have to make decisions as individuals and as groups, and consistent with our government and our other leaders, to make sure that we have the kinds of things in place so that we can continue to grow. Because if we do dumb things, we can actually bring progress to a halt, and we can actually regress. So this whole thing could either be stopped or it could be shifted into reverse if we don't make good decisions. Now, beyond that, like you said, there's a recipe. So imagine you're a baker and you want to make this delicious cake. Well, you got to put things together in the right manner and in the right proportion in order to have that cake turn out really well. You know, if you've ever done any kind of baking, if you miss a massive ingredient, then you know what? That's going to be terrible, even if everything else was right. So think about it as being a chef or a baker. We have to put the recipe together in the right way. And what are the major ingredients there? Well, you listed them off very nicely. I'm going to go in reverse order. Let's talk a little bit about the institutions, because that's a big word that sometimes scares people away. And the institutions come in two forms. They're the formal institutions, the official laws and regulations that come out of federal, state, and local government. And then you've got the informal institutions. You know, as they say, when in Rome, do as the Romans do.
That's right.
You know, you've got the local stuff. You know, what we do here in Tallahassee is totally different than the cultural and social norms in Miami, which is totally different than what they go through in New York. So you need to factor those in as well. But the institutions, that's just a fancy word for, you know, what are the rules?
Right. So that's both the written rules as well as the institutions like the
Yep.
Federal Reserve.
Yep, exactly. So if you and I are going to play a new board game on a Friday night, well, we want to know what the rules are. And the rules govern the decisions inside of that game. In the economic game, the rules are set forth by government, but also set forth by just the normal social interactions that people have.
Interesting. So what are some other examples of the formal institutions that are in place? We mentioned the Federal Reserve. So you have the whole governmental structure, right?
So you have
House, the Senate.
Laws are going to change incentives and decision making. You've got monetary policy, which is done by the Federal Reserve. In our country, other countries, they have other names, but it's a centralized bank that controls the money supply. We call that monetary policy. Then we got what we call fiscal policy, which comes from the legislature, the federal level, Congress, and then at the state level, we've got different forms there, and they make up regulations. They make up things that we can and can't do. They set the judicial system into place. So those are the formal rules. And then you've just got societal norms that govern behavior as well. So those are really important. But I want to circle back to the beginning one. We've talked about this a little bit earlier in terms of trade.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to imagine your life today and for the rest of the day without trading with anybody. Can't trade with anybody. And just pause and think about how miserable it would be at the end of the day if you weren't allowed to trade. So being in isolation is the fastest way to poverty and to a very low standard of living. So let's go back a few hundred years.
Plus depression.
Well, yeah. Or you just go back to, a few hundred years ago at the beginning of our country when, people literally had to do everything for themselves.
Right.
They had to grow their own food. They had to make their own shelter. They had to provide for their own transportation. I mean, those were the kinds of standards of living that we can't even connect with today. That just seems so terrible. And why do we have the kind of standard of living that we do today? Is because we trade with so many more people today. I mean, every day we trade with thousands of people. And the more we trade, the better off we are. The less we trade, the worse off we are.
Yeah, from the clothes you wear, from picking up your cell phone to getting in your car. I mean, all those you've had to trade at some point to to purchase those. You didn't make your own car or your own cell phone or the towers or the pencil or the pen. I mean, all of that. So 300 years ago, people made their own clothes. They made their own food. They cooked their own food. They built their own house, cut the trees down. So you're exactly right. I mean, that's progress, and that's the way we have things today, and it's a high standard of living.
Yes, absolutely. And we need to make sure that we keep institutions and rules in place that allow us to do more trade so that we continue this progress. Now, the other thing that's really important, and this has been one of the cornerstones of just American society and the American psyche, is the ability to try new things, entrepreneurship. Sometimes it sounds like a dumb idea. Oh, that'll never work. Well, it's amazing how many ideas that somebody first said that'll never work, a few years later turn out to be something that all of us can't live without.
Right, the norm.
So, yeah, I mean, at some point, Henry Ford said, you know what, driving around in a horse and buggy is just not the best way to get from point A to point B. Let's try something new. And, at some point in time, somebody came along and said, you know what, I think people might want a computer in their home. And initially I was like, oh, why would anybody want a computer in their home? They're so big and clunky and they don't really do anything. So these ideas need to be allowed to happen. Now, some of them are going to die. Some of them are going to be dumb. And the market will penalize you if it's a dumb idea, but the market will also greatly reward you if it's a good idea. And we talked about this a little bit previously with profits and losses. Those are the signals. Entrepreneurs, you're doing a great thing. Keep doing it. We like it. And you're making our life better.
Yeah.
And we need to allow for that entrepreneurial spirit. And I think America is one of the greatest places in the world that has really embraced that.
It is. And with that, we're gonna take a quick pause to close out for the radio show. But hang on, everybody. We're going to be right back. We're going to continue this and close this economic theory out. There's still some good juice left, some meat on the bone, so everybody just hold on. I am your host, Charles Musgrove, with Answers That Count. You know where to check us out. We're actually on Roku TV, Amazon Fire TV. We're on YouTube. We're on all your favorite podcasts, so check us out there. Check us out every week here on Answers That Count. We also have a website, Answers That Count. So hold on, everybody. Those that are listening to the radio show, you may want to go check us out and listen to the rest of the show. So we'll be right back. Everybody else, peace. All right, Joe, we'll continue with that. So it's funny that you mentioned how times have changed, that we now, if you do a comparison of now and go back 200 years ago, you can actually go back 10 years ago. And one of the things I like to refer to is the cell phone. If you look at some TV shows that are 10, 15 years old, if you go back to the 80s, you don't see anybody on those TV shows with a cell phone. They all use the landline, they were even using payphones. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
So payphones.
One of my favorite shows of all time was Cheers. And if you go back and you watch Cheers, you'll see that they had a payphone in the bar. They had a couple of landlines, and actually some of the comedy was centered around being on a landline. Prank calls and all kinds of other things. Sometimes the scene in the show was set up, and you literally couldn't do that today.
Right.
You can't prank call anybody, because as soon as the phone rings, it identifies the caller, and it's like, oh, that's who it is.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that would literally have to change. If you were to go back and reshoot the whole Cheers series, a lot of their scenes would have to be deleted or dramatically changed because the technology is so much different today.
It is. It's really interesting and almost comical to see that. And it's not that long ago. I mean, crazy enough, it's in our lifetime that so many of those changes have happened. So I don't know if we're old or the speed at which change happens in our lifetime has just been on hyperdrive.
Well, the speed of change is faster, and there's evidence to document that and measure the speed of change. Absolutely, it's changing faster today than it ever has in the course of human history.
Yeah, but I think to circle back to emphasize the importance of trade, and that was an economic theory that we discussed a couple of shows ago, was the importance of trade, and that plays into this economic theory, the better ways of doing things, and the entrepreneurial drive, and what we see the American people, how they want to drive to make things better and to succeed and to overcome the odds. And they take risks. They take risks to do things better and to make improvements. So that's that's what makes America proud, and we want to make things better here in America. So
Yeah,
that
and that's a good point. I'm glad you mentioned risk, because whether you're just somebody sitting in your cubicle in corporate America, or whether you're the owner of the firm, you do need to think entrepreneurially, and all of that does require risk. So let's just imagine an example that I'm just somebody sitting in my cubicle, relatively low on the corporate ladder, but yet I think I have a way that I can make my business run a little bit better. I'm going to introduce a new procedure. So I get out of my cubicle, I walk down the hallway, I go to my boss, I knock on the door, and I say, "Hey, boss, I think maybe we could do this a little bit better." Well, that takes some risks on my part, right? I mean, I need to expose myself a little bit. What if it turns out to be a bad idea? Or what if my boss doesn't like it? Okay, you know what? Maybe I feel bad. So I have to take a risk. But yet, if it works, it's going to make me better off. It's going to make my boss better off and our company better off. And that's part of the American spirit that I so much enjoy, is Americans are very willing to take that risk. We're very comfortable with that.
right.
It's an important part of making progress. Sometimes you got to do something you're not sure if it's going to work, but if you don't try, you're going to be stuck in status quo. And the other thing about Americans is we're not real fond of status quo. We do like to move forward.
Absolutely. And I think if you look around at the things we enjoy to do, you can always trace that back to somebody that took a risk because they wanted to make things better. They want to have a better product, a better service, and that's what makes the difference. I mean, go back to the cell phone. Look at the changes. If you go back to the early phone, it wasn't one you could put in your pocket. It was one that you carried around in a bag, or you may have stuck in your. You had to have it installed in your car, and that wasn't too long ago. I mean, that was in the mid '80s when that happened, and look where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, I was back in the early '90s. I got one of the early cell phones, and one of the sales pitches was all the accessories that come with it. Hey, I got this great looking bag over here. I mean, they
Right.
literally sell you a bag with your phone because it took that much space to carry that and the charger and all the other equipment that went around with it. I mean, it was like carrying around a small suitcase.
Yeah.
And today, we got these little bitty things, and the other thing that's amazed me about the phones is now I barely even have to touch the phone. I just push the button, I talk into it,
Exactly.
and it does all the things that I want it to do. I don't have to worry about my thumbs moving fast. I
Yeah.
just have to move my lips.
Now, if they
So,
told you that when the first phone came out, if they would have described that phone to you that we have today, you would have laughed at them.
yeah, oh, absolutely.
You'd have thought that was like stuff of the Jetsons. I mean, what are you talking about?
Right, right, exactly. What do you mean I'm talking to my phone to get it to operate? I
Yeah.
mean, we take that for granted. We do it all the time now, but 10 years ago, that would have been crazy talk.
Yeah. It's interesting. What else do we want to pick up on this 10th economic theory, Joe, that we haven't talked about so far?
Well, I think we need to touch upon savings and investment, because if somebody's going to take a risk, if they're going to try something new, they're probably going to need some funding for it.
Right.
So again, this is much broader than just I need to start a business, but we need access to what is referred to as capital markets. Capital markets are simply funding mechanisms. So if I want to go to school, I may not have all the money to pay tuition. May need to go borrow that. Well, I would go into a capital market in order to borrow those funds. If I want to start a new business, or if I want to expand my business, I may not have all the money sitting in a savings account in order to do that. So I need to go get capital markets. So the capital market is just a place to go get funding so that I can do the things that I want to do, either invest in myself through what we call human capital, that is just getting smarter and getting new skills, or invest in physical capital, which is a building or an apartment complex or something like that. So as you look around Tallahassee, you still see quite a bit of building. Just a few blocks from campus, you've got a few very large complexes going. I guarantee those builders don't have millions of dollars sitting in their savings account, and they're just drawing that out in order to build.
Right.
So if we're going to have progress, if we're going to have a new building, we need a mechanism such that small numbers of people pool their money together, and then that is bundled together and given to a large developer who needs millions of dollars at a time in order to make that building come into reality.
Right. Plus, you've got, and I may be jumping ahead, but you've got the financial markets too. So that developer is going to have a combination of equity raised from other risk takers, other entrepreneurs. Plus, they're going to have a lot of times a financial institution, a bank, to loan money to that development also, and that bank is taking a risk. That's another. They're a risk taker at a different element.
Yeah, I mean, because of course the bank wants to get paid back. So anytime the bank lends money, there's always a risk that they're not going to get it back, or they're not going to get all of it back. Maybe they get 90% of it back. Okay, that's pretty good. I want all of it. Worst case scenario is I lend money and the borrower never pays me anything back. So there's risks that every lender is going to have to make, and they have their procedures to make sure they're minimizing that. But I guarantee you, every bank has had somebody not pay in full, and
Absolutely.
that's devastating to that bank. But if they're large enough, they can, have the people who do pay back offset some of those who don't.
Right.
There's absolutely risks involved every time there's a lending transaction that happens.
Right, and the banks adjust that payback amount or that interest rate based on the assumed risk that they're taking. They'll take collateral to make sure they secure that loan as well. So there's things that the bank is doing to mitigate their risk in case the borrower fails in any situation.
Sure.
Well, good. Joe? Is there another element of the 10th?
Well, I think we touched on it. Let's make sure we read it again. Economic progress comes primarily through trade. We talked about that.
Trade. We love trade.
Investment, we just talked about that. Better ways of doing things and sound economic institutions. Let me give a little bit of plug to my good friend and co-author Jim Gortney. He spent a good bit of his career measuring economic institutions, and it's called Economic Freedom of the World Report. You can go to simply freetheworld.com and you can see all the data. But back in the before 1990, economists knew this was really important, but we didn't have a good way of actually measuring it. Well, Jim Gortney came along and partnered with some other very smart people, and now they actually do measure this. So we've got a new variable that we can put into our models, and now we have concrete historical evidence that shows us changes in economic freedom and changes in the quality of institutions. So Jim has done a tremendous job as an international scholar, and people around the world use this. He's got the index for just about every country in the whole world so that we can measure these changes over time. And that's been a tremendous asset to our profession, because as an economist, I love to measure things.
Oh, yeah.
And when I have something that's really important, but I can't measure it, well, then I can't give you very good cause and effect relationships, and I can't give you a really detailed explanation. So for the longest time, we knew institutions and policies were really important, but we didn't have a very good way of measuring it. Well, now we do, and our economic research is that much better for it.
Good. It's it's the data. It's like the scientists have their data, the economists have their data as well. So it's important to base decisions on actual data that has occurred.
Sure. Yeah. You don't want to base it on speculation or gut feeling or kind of survey. Hey, what do you think about things? You want your decisions based on actual evidence.
Right.
And now we can do that more with institutions because we have measurements like the Economic Freedom of the World Report.
Good. I'm glad you brought that up. Again, what was the website on that?
It's just freetheworld.com.
Okay, perfect. And since you mentioned James D. Gortney, I wanted to also do a shout out for the book that you are co-author of, Common Sense Economics. This is the third edition, the most recent edition. Joe is a co-author on this, along with Richard L. Stroop, Dwight Lee, and Tawny Fiorini. And Joe, you've talked about a fourth edition will be coming out soon, so we all look forward to that. And you can get this on Amazon or any of the other places that you would buy a book.
Oh, absolutely. It's all over the place. You can get an electronic version. So if you like to read a digital copy, it's there for you. Or if you like a print version, and all of that is very inexpensive. I think the most expensive version of the book is the hardcover, and it's less than $25. So very accessible, both in terms of reading and in terms of monetary price.
Good deal. Well, Joe, this has been another great show, and I enjoy the show. We talk about some economic theory, but we also apply that to today's economic tumult that we're dealing with, the environment that we have today. We looked at some of the headline stories this week, so this is not old stuff that we're looking at, and we show how to apply it to everyday living, everyday just as part of our life, how we deal with trade, how we deal with economics in an everyday personal basis. So we'll do that next time as well. We'll pick some articles that are relevant, and we'll go through those and apply theory to that to really put it in place. And we'll pick up another key theory next week. And Professor Joe Calhoun, good luck this week to FSU Seminoles as they take on the Miami Hurricanes down at in what used to be Joe Robbie Field. I'm not sure what it's called now, but it's down in Miami.
Down in Miami. Go Noles.
Go
Thanks for having
Noles. And you know where to find us. I am your host, Charles Musgrove, with Answers That Count. Thank you for joining us. We're on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to us and hit the alarm button for alerts when we put out a new show. We're on Roku TV and Amazon Fire. You can subscribe there as well. So like us, leave us comments at YouTube, or send me an email at cmusgrove@answersthatcount.com. Have a great day. Have a blessed week. Peace.